strange confluence of three sequential birthdays and the influence of the Estolian way. Nico, Max, and Brennan in California find the feast after the famine, their destiny entwined.
When I met Killian, I saw him as a man worthy of my love, purity, body, self, and soul. But he was not Estolian. On our third date, we celebrated his 30th birthday. As he described my aura, I felt as if fate had gently taken the reins from me, guiding me into my future. I had no doubt that Killian could see my aura, and when he brought me to his apartment and seduced me, I took his soul into my keeping. Despite reassurances to the contrary, this monumental event seemed irrelevant to him. On the 7th night, I discovered him flirting with several other women via text message. At that moment, I realized women do have a choice. They can reject the man whose soul they are keeping. The foundations of my world shook when I declared my aversion to being his wife. Strangely, for the next 60 years, I carried the weight of that part of my soul, his, as if he still lived, breathed, and walked the surface of the planet. Cecily Rue, Inscrito.
Lyra watched as the two left the room and then turned with a frown to Max.
I'm not quite sure what just happened,
She said to him. He chuckled.
My cousin has never been subtle.
He stood and crossed to a cabinet against one wall, pulling out a bottle and 2 glasses. The soft clink of glass echoed as he poured the effervescent golden wine. With a gentle touch, he dimmed the lights, casting a warm, intimate glow. Another flick of his fingers, and the room filled with the soothing strains of classical music. He approached her, offering one of the glasses.
Come.
He said, while gesturing towards a small sitting area.
We will be more comfortable over here. I have a question for you. You have learned a lot about Estolian customs since you got here.
He said to her.
Yes,
She agreed slowly.
particularly about marriage.
She added, having attended 2 Estolian weddings since her arrival.
It is customary for men to try to marry as close to their birthday as it is possible.
She nodded, remembering how often thoughts of his birthday had snuck into her dreams.
Liar.
His voice broke, and he paused to sip the wine before starting again.
He
took another sip of his wine. He was obviously nervous about something.
What is it, Max?
She prompted.
You are so beautiful. I want you to be mine, my wife, my other half, my everything.
He blurted out. She looked at him in amazement. Could this be yet another dream?
I didn't think you cared for me.
She said, remembering how distant he had been the last several days.
Oh, no, liar, I care. I have known since I first saw you that I wanted you to be the keeper of my soul, my Kaylee. Knowing that, I have had to avoid you, to keep my desire for you from overcoming my common sense.
Lyra raised the glass of wine to her lips, savoring the velvety taste, before placing it down gently on the table. The intensity in Max's gaze mirrored the hunger she had felt in her erotic dreams every night since arriving in Estolia. After setting his glass next to hers, he reached for her hands, his grip warm and firm as he met her eyes with unwavering intensity.
I had to ask, to give you a choice.
His voice resonated, the warmth of his breath brushing against her skin.
I could have simply tried to seduce you, but I wanted us to decide this together.
Standing up, he drew her to rise with him, his movements graceful and commanding.
I choose you, Lyra Langham. Will you choose me?
Was he just asking her out of convenience? The elder year that Nico mentioned was only open to married men, and he had just promised to do that.
Is it just because I'm available?
She asked. She was reminded of her mother's words.
If Dwayne must have this foreigner as a groomsman.
She made him sound like a terrorist.
We can always have Lyre opposite him. Just think, Pen, how exquisite you'll feel when compared to her. In fact, all the bridesmaids will be gorgeous next to Lyre. She does have her uses, you know.
Dwelling on feelings of inadequacy accomplished nothing. She shouldn't define herself by her mother's measuring stick, Yet she still struggled to let go of her parents' words and opinions. The same hurt that had accompanied her throughout her life lingered, even after meeting Max. She looked away, attempting to push aside both the hurt and her feelings of inadequacy. She didn't want to be a mere convenience for him. He moved closer, his warm hand lifting her chin, encouraging her to meet his gaze.
Liar, I fell in love with you the instant I saw you. I knew I wanted to be with you the rest of my life the minute I spoke with you.
The warm press of his lips over hers sent a shockwave of sensation from her lips to her toes and back to the press of his hips against hers. His lips nibbled at hers, and she felt her objections melt away. She wanted him to want to be with her for the rest of their lives. She kissed him back fervently. Their bodies pressed together told her that his imagination was also alert, as was his body. She pulled back slightly, looking at him for reassurance.
You really love me?
She asked him.
Yes, liar, I really love you. I was stunned by your incredible beauty, amazed that your family did not value you for who you are, that they could not see you as beautiful. I did not think an ordinary guy with thinning hair like me stood a chance with you.
Ordinary?
She was incredulous.
You're not ordinary. You're the most attractive man I've ever met.
She caressed his face.
I thought I was crazy to imagine you could care about me.
She flushed as she admitted.
But I've dreamed about you falling in love with me since I met you. I assumed you must have some beautiful Estolian woman already waiting to marry you as soon as you turned 30.
Liar, there is only one woman I will ever marry. I will marry you or nobody, and I would much rather marry you than live my life alone. But if I cannot have you, I would rather have no one.
He kissed her again, his hips softly rubbing against hers. Cool air on her back brought her thoughts back into sharp definition. She grabbed the dress before it could fall to the carpet.
Maximilian.
She closed her eyes and said his full name slowly, savoring it.
We can't. What would Nico or the others say if they walked back in here?
She did not want to deny him. Opening her eyes again, she looked up into his face, unsure how he would respond to being thwarted. He cupped both sides of her face and said,
This is the seclusion suite. None of them are coming back. We will not be disturbed.
He kissed her softly before pulling back to tell her,
One of the things contained in your blessing today was the approval of our union by deity. Normally, deity waits until after the seclusion to ratify a couple, but in our case, by Estolian law, if we want to be, we are already married.
Really?
He nodded. Then he grasped her hand and led her towards a heavy tapestry. Pushing it aside, she followed him into a small room dominated by a large bed. A lamp illuminated the space. He looked at her.
Liar, please tell me you will be mine. Tonight, tomorrow, and every day for the rest of our lives. Tell me you will keep my soul safe, create children with me, and try to learn to love me as much as I already love you. Please say yes.
While he spoke, she felt each word imprinted indelibly on her memory. She responded by releasing the dress she had been clutching to her chest, allowing it to fall to the floor. Then she reached up to the buttons of his shirt and began to unbutton them. The last of their outer garments fell to the floor, and she looked up at him, knowing she was blushing to be standing before him in nothing but her silky undergarments. She moved closer, raising her arms to hook them around his neck, pressing her body up against his. The feel of his naked skin against hers was more erotic than the dreams she had, especially when he cupped her buttocks and pulled her hips up tight against his rigid arousal.
I'm yours, Maximilian Luc Domain. Forever.
She whispered in his ear. He responded by kissing her passionately. Time ceased to matter as they dropped their clothing haphazardly on the floor and pushed back the covers on the beautiful bed. He lay back on the bed, looking at her as she crawled onto it, leaning over him, her hair falling like a curtain of molten lava around his face. She felt wanton. She could feel the heat of his body beneath her, and she looked down at him, feeling reckless and daring.
Ria said I should seduce you, make you mine.
She said, straddling his hips. He sat forward, taking one nipple into his mouth while his hands caressed her back, hips and buttocks.
What did you say to her?
He asked as he transferred his attention to her other breast.
I didn't think it was right to trap you.
She said. One of his hands cupped her, feeling the slick heat of her arousal. She was breathing in short gasps, impatient to know his possession. She shifted her position, looking down at him as his hands moved to span her hips, holding her poised over him.
I am not as altruistic as you, liar,
He said.
I want to trap you, make you mine, and keep you forever.
Are you sure?
She asked him. She could feel his body pressing against her.
Oh yes, liar.
He said, his breath leaving him in a hiss as he pulled her down onto his body, sliding inside of her. She let out a long, drawn-out musical sigh of pleasure. In the next few minutes, they reveled in the sensation of two bodies becoming one, while two souls merged permanently, an elemental fusion that was always destined to be.
In California find the feast after the famine, their destiny entwined. With deity's approbation, the confluence will be a sacred culmination of Estolian prophecy.